Guys, hope I find you well. What I wanted to talk about today is, well, just that it's going to be hard. No matter what change you're trying to make, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. You knew that already, but I just break it down a little bit. So it makes sense that because if you look at our brains, there's parts of our brains and the programming in our brains that goes back a very long way, right? Like pre-human even. So it makes sense that somewhere along the way there was developed a resistance to change. And I mean, if you look at people and you talk to people, everybody's got resistance to change, everybody's got fear of change going on. Different levels of it and different abilities to handle it, but it's all going on there. So it makes sense that what happened is there was, along the way through different evolutionary processes, there was a resistance to change developed. And it makes sense because if you think about it, if there's always this baseline resistance to change, it doesn't matter what the change is, then that means you're going to have to overcome that resistance. And that means you're going to have to find justification to overcome that resistance and the strength to overcome that resistance, which means that is probably a good change. Right? If it's a bad change, you're not going to get your shit together and make that change, right? It doesn't make any sense. And it also makes sense, too, that the more cautious apes were the ones that survived, right? Because, for example, if you tried to cross a desert to get to a new place and you couldn't do it, you just died in that desert, right? Like, there was no, you couldn't call your cell phone and be like, hey, Tom, like, I'm halfway across the desert here, can you jump in the Jeep and bring me some water? No, Tom was not coming. You just died in the middle of that desert. Or if you tried to take on an animal, if you tried to kill an animal that was bigger than you and you got hurt, you were dead. Right? Because like a cut would get infected, a broken bone wouldn't heal right, and you wouldn't be able to hunt. Right? So it didn't take much to take you out. So you had to be cautious. Right? And you had to be careful about which changes you made and what challenges you took on. And the other thing is, you're going to have to confront if you decide to make a change, it's usually because there's something negative going on, right? So you're going to have to fully confront that negativity inside yourself, and you're going to have to like fully realize just how hard you've been screwing yourself and how stupid you've been, right? Like if you've been in a bad relationship, and not even like an abusive relationship, but just a relationship that was just totally a waste of time, you're going to have to fully confront that and deal with the emotions associated with that and the self-judgment that comes along with that. And I know it's a little ridiculous that self-judgment is one of our biggest fears, but there it is. And you're also going to have to make the change, right? Because if you fully realize how much something's bothering you, you're going to have to make that change. And it's going to be tough, for example, if you're working a career that you don't want to be in. You're going to have to find a new career, you're going to have to start at the bottom in that new career, you're going to have to work your way up, you're going to have your friends, you might have friends in your line of work, you might lose those, etc., etc. But there's external things you're going to have to deal with. So you're afraid of dealing with the external things because, well, those external things are currently meeting your needs. And they might not meet your needs anymore with the change. So how do you deal with this once you realize that you have this internal resistance to change that's evolutionary or seems to be? You're going to have to confront yourself and the world about the bad things you've been doing. So what do? Well, you remember that self-judgment and fear of doing the work, that's internal, guys. That's going on in your head. You can control that to a degree. Alright, you can channel that energy elsewhere, you can distract yourself, you can meditate and just gain control over your emotions. There's ways to deal with that. Remember, it's worth it. Because if you're doing something stupid, it's worth it to make the change, because then you're going to be doing something awesome. Remember, too, that it's temporary. Right? Any struggle you're going through, the brunt of it is temporary. I mean, there might be struggle, like if you quit smoking, for example. There's smokers who get cravings for the rest of their life. But the most of the worst of those cravings are right at the start. Right? So you get through that. It's a temporary thing, guys. It's not for the rest of your life. Or if you do switch careers and you have to start at the bottom in a new career, that's temporary. You're not going to stay at the bottom. Especially if it's something you care about, you're going to work your ass off and you're going to climb that ladder. Don't worry about that. The longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get, guys. A lot of the time, like if you're in a crappy relationship, that's not going to get better if you don't confront it, right? If you're in a crappy job, that might get better, but it's probably not. If you have a crappy attitude, that's not going to get better without confronting it. I mean, sometimes, like with a job, for example, you might have to work the job you have for a few more months or a few years, whatever, but it's not good. Like, over 10 years, it's not going to get better. You're just going to learn to deal with it, suppress those emotions more. And the most important thing to remember is, because like when we first come up with a change, we see the entire thing sometimes, right? So we see all of the changes that have to be made and all of the work that has to be done. And guys, you don't have to do that all at once. Alright, like start small. If you got to work on your relationship, start with the small stuff. If you got to get a new job, maybe keep your job but get a part-time job in the field you want. If you want to change your attitude, have a better outlook on life, you know, that start small. You don't have to be happy tomorrow, but you have to start taking those steps. You don't have to be confident tomorrow, but you have to start taking those steps. So identify what steps you have to take and start making small ones. As always, onward and upward.